The floor was quiet, except for the slow sound of a mop moving back and forth. The night shift was always the same for Mark. He was a single dad, working late hours as a janitor in one of the tallest office towers in the city. Every night, while the world slept, he cleaned hallways and polished glass doors. Most people passed by him without even looking. To them, he was just a man in a gray uniform, pushing a mop and carrying a bucket. They never thought about his story or the struggles. Written in the lines of his tired face, Mark didn't complain. He needed this job. His daughter Lily was only 10 years old, and she was his whole world. Every extra hour he worked meant food on the table, school supplies, and rent for their small apartment. Tonight, the building was busier than usual. Executives in sharp suits rushed past him, whispering nervously as they headed toward the top floor. They had an important meeting with the company's international board. The atmosphere was tense. Mark noticed their worried faces, but he kept his eyes on the floor. He had learned long ago that the less attention he drew, the better. Still, he couldn't help but overhear pieces of conversation. Words like urgent message, classified, and no translation available drifted into the air as they walked by. Mark's hands tightened on the mop handle. He told himself it was none of his business. He was just there to clean out the elevator doors closed, leaving him alone again in the wide marble lobby. The silence returned, broken only by the squeak of wet rubber shoes and the steady rhythm of the mop dot. But then something strange happened. The large screen on the wall, usually filled with stock numbers and graphs, suddenly flickered. The numbers vanished. The colors shifted. Strange shapes appeared, symbols, curves and lines that twisted and glowed with a faint, otherworldly light. Mark froze. The mop slipped from his hand and water spread across the floor. His heart thumped against his chest as he stared at the screen. He knew those shapes. Executives rushed back into the lobby, their voices loud and sharp. "What is this?" one demanded. "Is it a hack?" Another shouted. "Get IT on the line right now." Security guards spread out, blocking the exits. Phones rang, people argued. The once silent lobby now full of panic. But no one understood the message on the screen. The symbols kept glowing, shifting, rearranging themselves into patterns no one in the room could read. Except Mark. He stood still, trying to calm his breathing. Memories he had locked away for years stirred inside him. Memories of nights under strange skies, of voices that did not belong to Earth, of promises he had made long ago. His lips moved before he realized it. A single word slipped out, low and quiet, like a ghost escaping his throat. It was not English. It was not any human language. It was alien. No one heard him over the chaos. He bent down, picked up his mop, and forced himself to keep cleaning. He dipped the mop back into the bucket, but his hands trembled. He told himself, "Stay calm. No one noticed. It doesn't matter. You're just a janitor. Just a father trying to get through another night." But deep down, he knew this night would not be like the others. The symbols on the screen were not random. They were a message. And he was one of the few people on Earth who could understand them. For years, he had buried that part of his life, never speaking about it. Never even letting his daughter see the truth. But now, in the heart of this corporate tower, surrounded by men and women with power and fear in their eyes, his secret was calling him back. The executives barked orders, demanding answers. The IT team arrived, confused and helpless. The guards stood stiff, pretending they could protect anyone from whatever this was, and there was Mark. Standing with his mop, his uniform wet from spilled water, his heart pounding like a drum. He whispered. Again, just loud enough for himself this time. One phrase in the alien tongue. The glowing symbols on the screen shifted. They moved faster, as if they had heard him. It's as if they were responding. Mark's breath caught in his throat. He had tried so hard to live a quiet life, to be invisible. But the universe never forgot him, and tonight it had come knocking on his door. The lobby was no longer quiet. The glowing alien symbols kept spreading across the big screen like fire burning through paper. Executives and guards stood frozen, some pointing, some shouting, but none of them knew what to do. The head of security barked orders into his radio. Shut down the network. Disconnect everything. The IT manager, pale and sweating, shook his head. It's not coming from us. I don't even know what system this is using. Everyone argued at once. Fear filled the air, thick and heavy. And, in the middle of it all, stood Mark, still holding his mop. He tried to look busy, but his eyes kept lifting toward the screen. The symbols were alive. They shifted and curved like they were breathing. And every time they changed, he understood. Them, it was like hearing a language you hadn't spoken in years but could never forget. The sounds, the rhythm. The meaning, it all rushed back to him like a storm breaking through a dam. He whispered again. It's just one word, soft and almost silent. A security guard standing nearby turned his head. What did you say? Mark froze. His pulse hammered in his ears. He shook his head quickly, pretending he had said nothing, and went back to mopping. But it was too late. The guard frowned, suspicious. And one of the executives, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a voice that cut like glass, stepped forward. You, she said. Janitor, did you just speak? Mark looked down at the wet floor, avoiding her gaze. No, ma'am. Just dust. Talking to myself, but her eyes narrowed. She had heard something, and she wasn't the type to ignore it. The screen flickered again. This time, the symbols rearranged into a clear sequence, lines repeating, a pattern forming. To everyone else, it was chaos. To Mark, it was a sentence, and the sentence was a warning. He felt his throat go dry. He knew he should stay silent. He knew the moment he spoke, everything would change, but the words slipped out before he could. Stop them. Danger, he said softly. The tall executive's head snapped toward him. What did you say? Mark's hand tightened on the mop. His heart was racing, but he forced himself to stay calm. He raised his eyes slowly, and for the first time, he looked straight at the group of powerful people who had never noticed him before. You won't understand it, he said. It's not for you. The lobby went silent. Everyone stopped, moving. Every pair of eyes turned to him. What do you mean? One of the executives asked nervously. You can read this. Mark's jaw clenched. He wanted to lie, to deny everything. But the truth was already out. The symbols shifted. Again, glowing brighter, and his chest tightened as he read the next words. They are watching. Mark shut his eyes for a second, fighting the memories that came rushing back long nights under alien stars. The hum of strange machines, voices that weren't human but spoke directly into his mind. He opened his eyes again. Everyone was waiting for him to speak. Yes, he said finally. His voice was calm, steady. I can read it. The executives gasped. A wave of whispers filled the room. The IT manager muttered something about impossible codes, while the guards exchanged nervous glances. The tall executive stepped closer. How? She demanded. What are you? Mark almost laughed. What was he? To them, he was a nobody. A man in a cheap uniform with a mop and a tired face. But years ago, he had been something else. Something the world had forced him to bury. He said nothing. Instead, he turned back to the screen. His eyes scanned the glowing script. Curve. End line told him more than he wanted to know. This wasn't just a message. It was a signal. A beacon. They're not just talking to us, he murmured. They're marking us. Who? One of the executives asked, his voice trembling. Mark? Didn't answer. He couldn't, not yet. The truth would break them. And once spoken, there would be no turning back. The silence stretched. The only sound was the low hum of the screen and the faint drip of water from Mark's mop bucket. Then, suddenly, the screen flashed. The symbols rearranged into a single glowing word, burning so bright it lit the entire lobby. Everyone gasped. Mark. Whispered the translation. Soon, the executives erupted into chaos again. Shouted to evacuate. Others demanded answers from the IT team, but the truth hung in the air like smoke. Something was coming. Something they couldn't stop. And the only man who understood the warning was the janitor they had ignored for years. Mark leaned on his mop, his face shadowed, his eyes cold. He had wanted a quiet life. He had wanted to stay hidden. But the universe never let him go. And now, the first shadow of what was coming had arrived. The lobby was still filled with chaos, but inside that chaos, all eyes kept darting back to one man. Not the executives in suits, not the guards with weapons, not the IT staff shouting into their headsets. It was the janitor. Mark stood there, mop in hand, silent, but his silence was louder than their noise. Everyone had heard him. He had spoken a word that no one else could, and the glowing screen had reacted to it. The tall executive, the woman with sharp eyes, stepped closer. Say it again, she demanded. Her voice cut through the air like a knife. Mark shook his head. His lips were pressed tight. No. The guard nearest to him took a step forward, hand on his radio. Ma'am, I think we need to remove him. But before he could finish, the screen changed again. The symbols twisted, flashing faster, brighter, until the entire lobby glowed in cold white light. People shielded their eyes. Some cursed, some stumbled backward, and then the light froze in one solid pattern. Mark's breath caught. He knew what it said instantly. His body went still. His mind went back to the stars. The words were clear. Chosen one identified. The lobby went dead silent. The executives stared at the screen, then turned to Mark. Slowly, realization spread across their faces. Fear, disbelief, and something worse, desperation. One executive whispered, "It's him." The head of security barked, "Arrest him. Now." But before the guards could move, the screen pulsed. The symbols stretched out, forming sound this time. A deep vibration filled the room. Not quite a voice, not quite a machine. It was alien speech, low, melodic, and filled with strange echoes. The executives froze. None of them understood a single word. But Mark did. Every syllable pierced straight into his brain like a memory that had never left. The message was not for them. It was for him. Mark raised his eyes, his face pale but steady. He opened his mouth, and without hesitation, he spoke back. The alien? Words rolled off his tongue with perfect fluency. His voice changed, carrying a strange rhythm, a weight that did not belong to Earth. Gasps spread through the room. Executives stared, jaws open. Guards lowered their weapons without realizing it. The tall executive whispered, "He's speaking to it. He's answering." The alien voice on the screen paused, then continued. Mark replied again, faster, this time, his words flowing like water. He had not spoken this language in years, but it felt as natural as breathing. And then it happened. The screen shifted once more. But instead of alien symbols, English words appeared. Clear, sharp, undeniable. Threat approaches. Prepare. The executives panicked. What threat? Prepare how? This is insane. Mark ignored them. His focus was on the voice, on the shapes still glowing behind the translation. He knew this was only the beginning. Finally, he lowered his eyes. He stopped speaking. His chest rose and fell heavily, like he had just run a marathon. The silence after his words was crushing. The tall executive stepped right up to him now, her voice sharp with fear. "How do you know this language?" she demanded. "What are you hiding?" Mark looked at her. For years he had lived in shadows, hiding what he knew, hiding who he was. But the universe had dragged him back into the light. Slowly, he spoke. "Because I've met them before." The room erupted. Executives shouted questions. Guards looked uneasy. IT staff whispered in disbelief. The tall executive narrowed her eyes. "Explain." Now, Mark tightened his grip on the mop handle. His voice was quiet, but each word carried weight. "Years ago, I was part of something the government buried. We made contact. Real contact. I learned their language. I saw their world, but when I came back, they erased me. Erased everything. I was told never to speak of it again, so I didn't, until tonight." Gasps filled the air. Some executives laughed nervously, refusing to believe. Others looked pale, too shaken to deny. Mark's eyes returned to the glowing screen. The symbols had gone still now, waiting, watching. "This isn't a hack," he said. "It isn't random, it's a warning. And they sent it because they know I'm here." The tall executive's jaw tightened. She didn't want to believe him, but the evidence was burning right in front of her eyes. Mark's voice dropped lower. "This building isn't just receiving a message, it's a target, and we don't have much time." The screen pulsed again, brighter than before. The alien voice returned, louder now, echoing through the walls. Mark understood every word. He turned back to the crowd, his face pale, his voice steady. "They said, they are coming." The lobby exploded in noise. Executives shouted. Guards panicked. Alarms started ringing. The once-calm building now shook with fear. But in the center of it all stood Mark, the janitor, the single dad. With tired eyes, holding a mop in one hand and the weight of the universe in the other. And the truth was out. The nobody they ignored was the only one who understood the message. The lobby felt like a storm trapped inside glass walls. Executives shouted over each other. Guards gripped their weapons without knowing what to point at. And the IT staff tapped frantically on their laptops as if typing fast enough could save them, but none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was the janitor. Mark stood still, mop leaning against his shoulder, his face pale but calm. The glowing screen above them pulsed with alien light, waiting for him to respond again. The tall executive with sharp eyes was the first to regain control. She raised her hand, silencing the room. Her voice was cold, but trembling underneath. "You will tell us everything, right now." Mark met her gaze. He didn't flinch. For years, he had lived like a ghost, silent and forgotten. Now there was no hiding. "I was 25, he began, his voice low but steady. "I was part of a mission the world never knew about. A mission beyond Earth." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some executives scoffed, thinking it a lie. Others leaned in, desperate for answers. "They weren't supposed to exist," Mark continued. "But they do. I lived among them for a time. I learned their language, their rules, their promises. And I learned something else too." His voice trailed off. The tall executive snapped. "What did you learn?" Mark's eyes flicked to the screen where the alien symbols glowed like fireflies in the dark. He took a breath. "That they don't forgive." The room went dead silent. The IT manager stammered. "You mean this is revenge?" Mark shook his head slowly. "Not revenge, enforcement. Years ago, there was an agreement. They gave us warnings, boundaries. They told us what must never be crossed. And someone powerful broke that deal." The executives shifted nervously. None of them wanted to ask the question, but it was written on every face. What deal? What boundary? Before anyone could speak, the screen pulsed again. The alien voice returned, low and thunderous, vibrating in the bones of everyone present. The symbols rearranged themselves at blinding speed before freezing into a single clear word. Mark translated. His voice was quiet, almost reluctant. Judgment. The crowd erupted into panic. Judgment. On who? This doesn't make sense. Shut it off. Somebody shut it off. The tall executive's voice rose above them all. Silence. Our sharp eyes locked on Mark again. Why you? Why are they speaking through you? Mark let out a humorless laugh. Because I was the one who promised them. I was there when the agreement was made, and now they've come to collect. The tall executive paled. She whispered, collect. What? Mark looked around the lobby. The guards, the IT team, executives clutching their briefcases like they were shields. His voice was heavy. Us, a murmur spread through the room. Fear tasted like metal in the air. Then the lights flickered. The building groaned, deep and low, as if something outside pressed against it. The screen pulsed brighter, sending streaks of light across the marble floor. One guard shouted, "Ma'am, something's moving outside." Everyone rushed to the windows. Far in the night sky, a shadow hung, massive, silent, and unnatural. At first, it looked like a dark cloud. But then the lights from the city below reflected against its sharp edges. It was not a cloud. 'Twas a ship. The executives gasped. Some screamed. Phones dropped to the ground. The IT staff froze, their screens forgotten. Mark's heart pounded. But his face stayed calm. He had seen that shape before. He had stood beneath it years ago, when he was younger, braver, and more foolish. He had believed the deal would protect Earth forever. He was wrong. The tall executive's voice shook. Tell me the truth. Can you stop this? Mark looked at her. His eyes were tired but strong. Maybe, but not with your weapons. Not with your money, only with words. The screen pulsed again, demanding his attention. The alien voice filled the lobby, louder this time, vibrating the very air. Mark listened, translating in his mind. The words were heavy, final, they say. He whispered that time is almost over. That Earth has one chance left. And that chance is me. The executives stared at him, horrified. Guards shifted uneasily, unsure whether to protect him or lock him up. Mark turned to the window, to the massive shadow in the sky. His voice dropped lower. They don't care about your titles. They don't care about your power. They care about the promise we broke. And they've come to decide if we're worth sparing. The room fell into silence again. Fear thickened like smoke. For years, Mark had been invisible, a man pushing a mop in empty hallways. But now, in this moment, he was the only one who could stand between humanity and destruction, and the weight of that truth pressed down on him like the shadow of the ship above. The shadow outside the building did not move. It simply hovered, silent and massive, blotting out the stars. The sight alone was enough to make grown men tremble. Inside the lobby, the air was heavy with fear. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Every ear strained for another sound, another sign. The glowing screen pulsed again, humming with alien energy. Mark stood still, staring at the ship beyond the glass. His hands gripped the mop tightly, though he knew it was useless now. His voice was steady when he finally spoke. They've come to test us, he said. The executives turned, their faces pale. Test us, one repeated, his voice shaking. Mark nodded slowly. Years ago, Earth made a deal. A promise to respect their boundaries, to never cross into their forbidden space. In return, they left us alone. They allowed us to grow, to breathe, to survive. The tall executive narrowed her eyes, and now Mark's jaw tightened. Now someone broke that deal. Someone went too far. And they're here to remind us what happens when humans think rules don't apply. The room filled with whispers. Executives leaned into one another, trading rumors like desperate children. Is he telling the truth? How would he even know? This is madness. Aliens, agreements. This is impossible. But no one could deny what they had seen with their own eyes. The symbols, the voice, the ship in the sky. The tall executive snapped her fingers, cutting. Through the noise, "What do they want?" she asked. Mark hesitated. He looked at the screen, then back at the ship. His chest felt heavy. "They want proof," he said finally. "Proof of what?" Mark's eyes were dark. "Proof that we're worth sparing." The words dropped into the silence like stones into deep water. One of the younger executives shook his head violently. "This is insane. We should call the military, call the government. They'll know what to do." Mark gave a bitter laugh. The government already knows. They've known for decades. And if the military fires a single shot, Earth won't last. A day, the young man paled. Sinking back, another voice rose from the crowd, harsher. "How do we know you're not lying? Maybe you're working with them. Maybe you're the reason they're here." The guard nearest to Mark stiffened, his hand hovering near his weapon. The tension in the room thickened, turning sharp. Mark stood his ground. "If I were working with them, you'd already be gone. They don't need me to destroy you. They need me to stop them." The tall executive studied him carefully. Her voice was softer now, but colder. "Then stop them." Mark's eyes flicked to the screen again. The symbols shifted faster, building into longer phrases. He translated quietly, his voice a whisper only he seemed to understand. "They say, Earth has broken faith. They say, we are greedy, dangerous. They say, humanity must prove it can change. Or..." He stopped. "Or what?" The tall executive demanded. Mark swallowed hard. "Or we will be removed." The lobby erupted in panic. Executives shouted, some crying out in fear, others demanding solutions. Guards raised their weapons, as if pointing them at the windows. "Would keep the ship away." The tall executive's voice cut through the noise again. "Quiet." Her gaze never left Mark. "So they've given us a choice. What is their test?" Mark's eyes were tired. He turned toward the glowing screen, reading the shifting words. "It won't be easy. They don't test strength, not weapons, not money. They test character." Confusion rippled through the crowd. Character? What does that even mean? This is ridiculous. Mark's voice grew harder. "They will look at us. At our decisions. At how we treat each other. At whether we choose fear, or courage, greed, or sacrifice. That is how they judge." The tall executive's jaw tightened. She didn't like this answer. It was not something she could control with power or money. But another executive, older and rounder, shouted, "Why should we trust you? You're just a janitor, a nobody. For all we know, you're tricking us." Others began nodding, the fear turning them against him. The guard's hand rested heavier. On his weapon, Mark felt the room shifting. Panic was making them dangerous. He straightened his shoulders. His voice rose, firm, cutting through the noise. "You don't have to trust me, but you can't run from them. They already see us. They already know. The only choice we have is to face it or be destroyed." The screen pulsed again, brighter than ever. This time, the symbols rearranged into English letters, leaving no room for doubt. "Final trial approaches." The words burned into the minds of everyone who read them. The ship outside moved at last, its shadow gliding slowly across the city, silent and terrifying. Lights flickered along its surface, strange and alien, scanning, watching. The tall executive turned back to Mark. Her voice was cold steel. "Then you'll face this trial. You'll speak for us." Mark's heart sank. He had feared this. He had lived his whole life trying to escape it. But the truth was clear. He was the only one who could. He looked out the window at the alien ship, his reflection faint in the glass. His tired eyes stared back at him, and he thought of his daughter waiting at home. Safe and unaware. He whispered, almost to himself. I never wanted this. But the universe didn't care what he wanted. The test was coming. And whether he liked it or not, he would stand as humanity's voice. The ship outside no longer hovered in silence. Lights rippled across its dark surface, moving like waves on water. Then, with a deep hum that shook the glass walls, a beam of pale light stretched downward, piercing the clouds. It wasn't an attack knot. Yet, it was a searchlight, a summons dot inside the lobby. The floor trembled. The executives clutched the walls. The IT staff ducked under desks, and the guards shouted orders that meant nothing. Mark stood at the center, staring at the beam. His chest rose and fell heavily. He knew what it was. He had seen it before. There, looking, he said quietly. The tall executive turned sharply. Looking for what? Mark's eyes didn't leave the window. Not what. Who? The silence that followed was suffocating. Every gaze in the room shifted toward him. The janitor, the man they had ignored for years. One of the executives, his voice shrill with panic, shouted, "They want him. Give him to them." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Guards stiffened, glancing at Mark as if unsure whether to protect him or hand him over. Mark didn't move. His voice was calm, though his heart pounded like a drum. If they wanted me dead, I'd already be gone. This isn't execution. It's a test. The screen flickered again, symbols burning brighter. Mark's eyes scanned them, translating. Instantly, they say, the voice must answer, or silence will fall. The tall executive's face hardened. Then, answer them. Mark closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of Lily, his daughter, sleeping peacefully in their small apartment across the city. He had promised her a normal life, promised her safety. And now, the universe demanded he break that promise. He opened his eyes. The beam outside widened, filling the sky with blinding light. The building shook as if caught in the breath of a giant. Executives screamed. It's going to destroy us. Do something. Speak to them. Damn it. Mark's throat felt dry. His voice came low at first, then stronger as the alien words rolled off his tongue. The sound was strange, layered, as though two voices spoke at once, his human voice, and the echo of something older. The beam pulsed in response. The building stilled. The lights flickered but held. Everyone froze, watching him. Mark continued, his voice flowing faster now, his memory unlocking words he hadn't spoken in years. He wasn't just talking, he was pleading, explaining, defending. The alien voice answered, booming from the screen, shaking the marble floor. It was not angry. 'Twas cold, curious. Testing. Mark translated between breaths. They say humanity is reckless, that we break promises as easily as we breathe, that we cannot be trusted. A younger executive shouted, they're right. Look. At us, we can't even agree on this room. The tall executive silenced him with a glare, but fear spread anyway. The screen shifted again. New symbols burned across it, sharp and final. Mark's stomach dropped as he read them. They demand proof, he whispered. Proof of what? The tall executive asked. Mark's voice was heavy. Proof that humans value more than power. Proof that we can choose sacrifice over greed. The executives looked at one another in terror. None of them wanted to hear more. The alien voice thundered again. The screen flashed so bright it hurt to look. When the glow faded, one sentence appeared in English letters. One must stand for all. The lobby went silent. Executives exchanged nervous glances. The meaning was clear. Someone had to face the trial. Someone had to be the example, and every eye turned back to Mark. The tall executive's voice cut the silence. It's you. You're the one they want. Mark didn't argue. He couldn't. Deep down, he had known this from the moment the screen first flickered. He was marked long ago, but another executive shouted, "Send him out then. Maybe they'll leave us alone." The guard stepped closer to Mark, caught between protecting him and delivering him. The tension was a wire pulled tight, ready to snap. Mark raised his hands slowly, stopping them. His voice was calm but unshakable. "If I go, I don't go as a prisoner. I go as a voice. If you send me in chains, you doom us all." The tall executive studied him for a long moment. Her sharp eyes searched his face, looking for weakness. She found none. At last, she nodded. "Then you go free. But if you fail," Mark finished her sentence, "then none of us survive." The beam outside pulsed again, brighter, closer. It washed over the building, through the glass, through the walls, filling the lobby with cold light. The symbols on the screen flared one last time, forming words that even the humans could read. Choose. Now. Mark stepped forward, his shadow long against the marble floor. His mop clattered to the ground, forgotten. For the first time in years, he stood tall not as a janitor, not as a ghost, but as the only human who could face what was coming. The lobby held its breath. Guards lowered their weapons. Executives fell silent. The IT team froze with hands hovering above their keyboards. Mark walked toward the window, toward the blinding beam, his face calm, but his heart heavy. He thought of Lily again, her small hands holding his, her laughter, her dreams. He whispered, so softly only he could hear, "For you." The light outside widened, swallowing the night, and then the building shook as if the sky itself had opened. The beam swallowed him. For a moment, Mark felt weightless, his feet no longer touching the marble floor. The lobby, the executives, the guards, all of it blurred into white light. He raised his arm to shield his eyes, but the light seeped through his skin, through his bones. Then suddenly, the ground returned beneath him. Cold metal, smooth, silent. He was no longer in the building. He stood inside the alien ship. The air was heavy, filled with a low hum that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Strange symbols glowed across black panels. The space was vast, endless, yet empty. And then they appeared. Figures stepped out of the shadows, tall and slender, their skin of faint silver that shimmered like water under the moon. Their eyes glowed faintly, unblinking, ancient. They carried no weapons, yet their presence was overwhelming. One stepped forward. Its voice filled the chamber, not through sound, but directly in his mind. "Human, you carry the tongue of our people." Mark bowed his head slightly. "Yes, I remember." The alien's gaze was piercing. "Your kind broke the oath. Your kind spread into forbidden skies. Why should we let you remain?" Mark's throat tightened. He thought of Lily again, of her smile, her innocence. He thought of Earth, noisy and flawed, but still home. He forced himself to meet their gaze, because humanity is more than its mistakes. The chamber filled with a low vibration, almost like laughter. More, you kill, you consume, you betray. Always hungry. Always. Reaching, where is your proof of worth? Mark stepped forward. His voice grew stronger. You see our greed, our violence, and yes, it is real. But you do not see everything. You don't see the father who works all night so his child can eat. You don't see the people who give what little they have to save a stranger. You don't see love, sacrifice, hope. The alien tilted its head, studying him. The others murmured, their voices echoing like distant thunder. Mark's chest rose and fell, but his words came steady. We are broken, yes, but we are also learning. We fall, but we rise again. We fail, but we try again. That is what makes us human, not perfection, but the fight to become better. The chamber went silent. The alien's glowing eyes shifted. Unreadable, then another voice entered his mind. Deeper, older. One voice cannot speak for all. Mark clenched his fists. I'm not just one voice. I'm a father who fights for his child. I am a worker who carries the weight of silence. I am every human who has been ignored, forgotten, dismissed. If I stand here, then all of them stand. With me. The air vibrated. The aliens seemed to ripple like water disturbed by wind. Finally, the first alien spoke again. You would defend a species that destroys its own home? That devours its world. Mark's voice sharpened. Yes. Because we can change. We already are. You see only the worst of us, because the worst is loud. But the best of us, his voice cracked, then steadied. The best of us saves even when it costs everything. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the chamber shook. Light poured from the walls, brighter and brighter until it hurt too. Stand. Mark gritted his teeth, refusing to look away. The alien's voice thundered through his skull. You are fragile. You are flawed. And yet, you endure. The light dimmed. The figures stepped back. The first alien raised its hand, and the symbols on the walls rearranged into a single phrase. Earth shall remain. Mark sagged with relief, his knees almost buckling. His chest heaved, but his eyes burned with stubborn fire. The alien added, softer now, but remember. We are watching, break faith again. And no words will save you. The beam of light swallowed Mark once more. When his vision cleared, he was back in the lobby. Executives gasped. Guards stumbled backward. The screen had gone dark, silent. The massive ship pulled away, rising higher into the clouds, till it vanished among the stars. The building was silent. The tall executive stepped forward. Her face pale, but her voice steady. What? What did you do? Mark looked at her, then at the others. He thought of the alien's words, of the warning that still rang in his head. I reminded them what it means to be human. He said simply, no one spoke. The executives, the guards, the IT staff all stared at him with wide eyes. The janitor. The man they had ignored. Mark bent down, picked up his mop, and wrung it out in the bucket. Water splashed softly against the marble. I still have work to finish. He said. The lobby remained in stunned silence as he pushed the mop across the floor. As if nothing had happened. As if he had not just spoken for all of humanity, but... Deep inside, Mark knew the truth. The universe would never forget this night, and neither would he.